Okay, right. Sorry about that, everyone. So finally, we have Matt Sanderson, and Matt's work examines how design can explore the complexities of humans. Highlighting design ontology shows us that simplification leads to polarization and othering.
Thanks, Katie, and thanks to Gabe and Sash as well. Really good presentations. It's good to see some familiar names and faces, also a little bit unnerving, but I will plod on anyway. So design has played a part in the success of neoliberalism, from the carefully designed narratives that strengthen the ideology to the production of products that drive consumption. This dominant capitalist narrative underpins the challenges faced by radical designers of change. New narratives and stories are needed to inform insights and benefit those who are marginalized in society. I'm going to start by telling you my story as a sort of micro symptom of a macro system and a metaphor for the problematic capitalist narrative. Though my schooling was troubled, I was considered weird or different. I didn't fit into the system in place and railed against it. My differences made it harder for me to learn in a rigid setup, and as a result, I left school fully at 14, having probably only attended 50% of schooling prior to that. My skills and attributes were never explored or encouraged. They simply didn't align with the script. The narratives in politics at the time that were perpetuated in the news and institutions was that there were no jobs, and if you were lucky to get one, it would be in manual work. The narratives that were directed at me were that I was weird and I wouldn't amount to anything. In retrospect, I was lucky to get an apprenticeship as a plasterer, but again, I was faced with narrative designed to keep me down. Know your place, don't get too big for your boots, don't get above your station were tropes I heard regularly. These narratives and labels put on me were starting to weigh heavy, and that job didn't last long. So with low confidence and a lack of self-worth, I entered into a lifestyle that would become self-destructive. I was drinking heavily, taking drugs to overcome social anxiety, and what I now know to be masking, trying to present a face that was acceptable. As you can imagine, being drunk in social situations in a rough city centre, I was vulnerable and I was assaulted on many occasions. And this reinforced my lack of self-worth and my decline in mental health. And this was my normal, but I now realise that it didn't have to be. I became very understanding of others' mental health challenges, but wouldn't admit to my own. I stigmatised myself because admitting it would probably be admitting that they had won. I genuinely feel that mental health will be stigmatised in a capitalist society, as when you have challenges, you're not able to contribute to it, and admitting people can't cope then would be admitting that there is something wrong with the system. So only relatively recently that I've realised that I internalised and reinforced a lot of these narratives, often telling myself that I can't. I do consider myself lucky, however, to have, throughout those negative experiences, I maintained a fuck you attitude and was schooling myself in life. So now I'm reframing those narratives purposefully and positively. I've got a passion and a purpose to help people tell their stories and not have the narratives of their lives told by someone else. When we ascribe a narrative to people, we stop being curious and encourage polarization and othering. Capitalism often refers to the trickle-down effect of wealth, but it's often the narratives that trickle down, reinforced by media outlets aligned with their ideology. If the government can be seen to act selfishly and show little dignity to the vulnerable, then some in society will take on that mantle. We're to challenge damaging beliefs that also align with these narratives. We must engage with these audiences. So I now want to demonstrate how these experiences have influenced me and my interest in design ontology. So first of all, I wanted to design a visual representation of how emotions manifest in the ontology of the human condition. So I started by using an existing visual representation, took the iconic Vitruvian man. So at first I thought I'd interrogate the embedded culture using radical design modes. To put ontological design into practice, I wanted to be sure I've got the right tools in place. I must understand the implications of my practice to avoid reinforcing damaging narratives. To address the challenges, I opened myself up to complexity. So I was trying to think beyond the design, more about its processes and then their repercussions, in order to examine its cultural relevance. The embedded ontology of the Vitruvian man as a singular human body is problematic in that it's situated in Anglo Eurocentric cultures and does not account for pluriversal understandings of the body. The Vitruvian man places this white, perfect man at the centre of the universe, subjugating other ontologies and universalizing colonial ways of knowing. So latterly, the Vitruvian man inspired work by the architect Neufert, and it was used as a universal standardized version of human bodily proportions to aid architectural design, as you can see here in the diagram. And we see that this is evidenced today as buildings have consistently failed to acknowledge difference. People are being designed out by an idealistic one-size-fits-all view of the human body that doesn't account for difference. Design justice seeks to include and empower the people with direct lived experience of the conditions that design is trying to change. A study suggests that people who consider their opinions to hold more superiority to others will miss opportunities to enhance their knowledge. This can be really dangerous in design, especially when design has so much impact on our lives. So I wanted to challenge reductivism, standardization, and simplification, and enable people to tell their stories. In response, I have produced an infographic that is a representation of design ontology and the complex web of life. So the idea of this was to decolonize the Vitruvian man and interrogate the embedded normative aesthetics, to embody difference and challenge the one-size-fits-all notion of perfectionism in an idealistic archetypal human body, embracing the evolution of the Vitruvian man. Celebrating difference in our subjective ontologies, which in turn demonstrates a commonality, that we're all shaped by our outside forces, often beyond our control. I removed the box that was around the original Vitruvian man to allow for the possibility that this notion of perfection doesn't exist. The idea of perfection in the Vitruvian man with the box was that the height of a man is supposed to be identical to his arm span. That people can be put into a box for the sake of a calculation is problematic. So I thought I would try it. So here we go. Put myself in a box. And it turns out I'm not perfect. My arm span is wider than my height. But there was one way I could fit into the box, and that was by doing this. So as you can see, we're back to the my diagram. So this was me. This is my ontology. You know, there are billions of these around the pluriverse. This is me surrounded by my environmental ontologies that I can consider having influenced my world. So inside these are also subjective needs and identities that in turn have influence on me. And then inside the being, the different colours represent emotions that may manifest as a symptom of being in the world. So we're all designers, I think, in our actions and our conversations. In Designing in Dark Times by Hannah Arendt, she describes dark times as the darkness is what comes when the open light spaces between people, the public spaces where people can reveal themselves, are shunned or avoided. The darkness is the hateful attitude towards the public realm, towards politics. And I just think this rings very true now. I mean, that was written in the 50s, I think, but this rings so true now, very current, especially in social media and design cultures. I think a radical designer's task is to illuminate these spaces through design narratives and open discourses. listening to attitudes and opinions that could be challenging. However unpalatable someone's views may appear, they're formed by their subjective realities. We have agency in the discourse that we engage in and an ability to be curious about others. If we encourage equitable conversation, allow people to speak and find the tensions, problems then become opportunities for change. We need to see all of ourselves as actants and agents of change. As I have, be vulnerable, encourage vulnerabilities, and build trust by not exploiting it. I'm just going to leave this nice quote on there, and then I'm going to start closing that presentation. Thank you.
The song.